She pushed her mop across the polished floor of the terminal, a ghost in a blue uniform. No one knew her name, and no one cared to ask. She was just part of the background, until the most powerful man in the room collapsed, gasping for air, surrounded by panicked screams from people utterly helpless to act. That's when her voice cut through the chaos, sharp and certain. "Stay back! I'm a doctor!" In that single moment, the world stood still, and the woman, who everyone ignored, became the only person who could save his life. Cleaning the first-class lounge was always a high-wire act. Everything had to be spotless, but the person doing the cleaning had to remain unseen. Eleanor moved like a shadow between the leather armchairs and half-empty champagne flutes. At 9:12 p.m., a group of executives swept in. Among them was Arthur Sterling, a man the tabloids called the king of private healthcare. He spoke loudly, dismissing everyone around him, including the staff trying to assist with his luggage. Elena simply watched, quietly, silently. Minutes later, a sheen of sweat appeared on his brow. His breathing grew labored. His hands began to tremble. The arrogance on his face melted away, replaced by a mask of pure agony. Sterling staggered. Eyes darted around the room. No one knew what to do. "Call a doctor! Somebody call 911!" Elena heard the sickening thud of his body hitting the marble floor. Glasses shattered. The screams intensified. She ran. Pushing past a man filming with his phone, she dropped to her knees beside the body and shouted, with the soul of someone who never hesitates when a life is on the line, "Everyone, stay calm. I'm a doctor." Elena Rojas had always lived two lives, the one the world saw and the one she desperately tried to remember. To everyone else, she was just another woman in a custodian's uniform pushing a cleaning cart through the sprawling terminals of JFK Airport. She never spoke back, even when people looked right through her. She knew where to wipe away a spill and where to hide her tears. But at home, when the uniform came off, the warrior inside was revealed. Her son, Mateo, 11 years old, was her entire world. An asthmatic boy, full of life and questions. "Mom, is it true you used to be a real doctor?" he'd ask, his eyes wide with wonder. She would smile. "I still am. I'm just waiting for America to remember that too." On the wall of their small Queens apartment, a medical degree from the University of Havana was framed with duct tape. Beside it, worn-out anatomy textbooks and a stack of review materials for the U.S. medical licensing exams she studied for at night, after her second shift. She slept 3 hours a day, fueled by coffee and purpose. Before coming to the United States, Eleanor was a cardiologist, trained, respected, admired. But the immigration system, the medical bureaucracy, and a crushing lack of money had forced her into the shadows. She had tried every legal path to get her license certified, all of them except the one that required connections she didn't have. Then came the silence, the closed doors, the denied opportunities. She took the janitor job for the bare essentials, a steady paycheck, health insurance for her son, and a sliver of dignity, even if it was cloaked in anonymity. Every morning before dawn, Elena would repeat the same mantra to herself. "It's not where you are, it's who you are." But the days were getting harder. A new supervisor, Mark, hassled her about her serious demeanor. "You think you're some kind of professor? Pick up the pace, lady." And Elena, with her calloused hands and tired eyes, would just lower her head. That evening, before she left for work, Mateo had a bad coughing fit, a low-grade fever. "It's okay, mijo. I'll be back early." But a feeling deep inside her knew tonight would be different. When she arrived at the airport and saw Arthur Sterling's name on the VIP lounge schedule, a strange sensation tightened her chest. It wasn't fear. It was instinct. It was on this very night that everything was about to change, forever. Elena's greatest desire wasn't money, it wasn't fame, or even the recognition she had been denied so many times. It was something simpler, more profound. She just wanted to hear someone say, "Dr. Rojas, you made it in time," and to feel once again the rhythm of life returning beneath her fingertips. Since leaving Cuba, that was the sound she missed the most, the quiet relief of a resurgent heartbeat. In medicine, she hadn't just found a career, she had found her calling. Her father used to say, "It doesn't matter where you were born. If you save a life, your existence has meaning." He never saw her graduate. He died at 56 of a heart attack in the middle of a construction site. Elena swore her life would be different. She swore no one else in her family would die from neglect. That's why, when Mateo was born premature, she knew the world couldn't be her enemy. It had to be her battlefield. In America, everything seemed promising at first. There was hope in the air, talk of opportunity, programs for foreign professionals. But it only took 2 years for her to understand that the promise wasn't for everyone. Without sponsors, without the money for exorbitant legal fees or official translations, she was blocked 3 times from taking the medical board exams. On her last attempt, the administrator suggested, with a sly grin, that she could grease the wheels with an informal financial contribution. Elena responded by filing a complaint. The case was dismissed for lack of evidence, and she was silenced. That's when she took the cleaning job. The pay was minimal, but it came with a basic health plan, enough to cover Mateo's respiratory crises. It was either that or watch him languish in a public hospital. Waiting for hours for care, she knew exactly how to provide. Eleanor kept a notebook hidden in a drawer. In it, she wrote down everything she wanted to do when she could be a doctor again. A free clinic day for the community once a week. Care for homeless pregnant women. A project called Open Heart in her father's memory. She read that notebook every week. It's what kept her standing when exhaustion made her knees buckle in a staff bathroom, when wealthy travelers complained about a stray hair on the marble floor, when someone asked if she could even spell her own name. She would read the notebook and remember who she was. Elena also dreamed of something more personal. She wanted Mateo to be able to say at school, "My mom's a doctor," and for it not to be a memory, but a living reality. So she studied in secret, downloaded review guides on her phone, watched first aid videos on the bus, ran through differential diagnoses while scrubbing sinks, calculated adrenaline doses while mopping the departure lounge. The dream wasn't far away. It was close enough to hurt. She knew she could save lives. All she lacked was permission. And sometimes she'd ask herself, does a piece of paper define who I am? Or is it what I do with what I know? The question was painful, but never as painful as the memory of losing a pregnant neighbor because she had no legal authority to treat her, even though she knew what to do, even as she begged them to call for help. She cried that night, alone, her hands feeling too clean, hands that, if they had acted, could have saved 2 lives. Now, whenever she saw someone collapse at the airport, her entire body went on high alert. But she held back. She couldn't risk being fired, deported, reported for practicing medicine without a license. Until that night. Until the moment a life, even the life of a man who despised her, was a single breath away from vanishing. Her desire was never for revenge. It was always for the right to help. And on that day, as Arthur Sterling's body fell before her, all the years of silence, fear, and restraint erupted in a single cry that pierced the lounge like a bolt of lightning, a declaration of her true identity. Stay calm. I'm a doctor. The problem with saving someone in public is that afterward, no one lets you be invisible anymore. Elena realized this the next morning when she arrived for her shift and found a group of employees huddled in the break room, silently watching a video on a phone. She didn't even need to see the screen to know what it was. She yelled, "I'm a doctor," and started doing chest compressions, just like in the movies, one of the security guards said. I thought she was bluffing, but she actually saved him. The old man started breathing again. She did everything. The cleaning lady. Elena shrank into a corner, trying to avoid being seen, But it was too late. The truth was spiraling out of control, and what felt like a moment of liberation was quickly becoming a threat. That same morning, Mark, her supervisor, called her into a supply closet. "What did you do last night, Elena?" "I provided first aid." "First aid? You're a janitor, not a paramedic." "I am a doctor, a graduate." "A doctor, huh? You got a license, registered in this state?" "I'm in the process of getting certified." "Then you're not a doctor here, you understand? This could cause huge problems for the company. If that man had died, you'd be in jail." Elena stood in silence. Her heart was pounding. It wasn't fear. It was a cocktail of indignation and powerlessness. She had saved a life, and now she was being threatened for it. Later that day, she learned that the man she saved, Arthur Sterling, was in the hospital in stable condition, with no lasting damage. The news was good, but also dangerous. If he confirmed to the press that he was treated by a woman without a US medical license, they could hold her legally responsible. For the first time in a long time, Elena wished she hadn't helped, not from a lack of compassion, but because of what it was about to cost her. During her second shift, there were more stares, more whispers. A few co-workers offered timid smiles of support. Others looked away. Then, at the end of the night, she got a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Is this Elena Rojas?" "Yes. Who's speaking?" "This is Dr. Ben Carter, the on-call physician at the airport. I arrived yesterday after you had already begun treating Mr. Sterling." Elena froze. "I just wanted to say," he continued, "you saved that man's life. I only did what had to be done. You executed the protocol perfectly. Even I wasn't sure if you were a doctor." "I am. I'm just not recognized here. That's the country's fault, not yours." "Why are you calling me doctor?" "Because they're going to try and silence you. And if that happens, find me. I'm a witness to what I saw." That call was both a relief and a sentence. The doctor knew, and if he knew, others could find out. From that moment on, Elena could no longer hide. 3 days later, the video of the rescue hit social media. It was posted by Sophia Chen, a journalist who had been a passenger in the lounge and had quietly recorded the whole thing. The clip was short but explosive. It showed the exact moment Elena knelt, started compressions, and shouted technical commands with flawless precision. It had a simple caption: "The cleaning lady saved the owner of the largest hospital network in the country, and no one even asked for her name." It went viral in hours. Thousands of comments. People asking who she was. Doctors defending her actions. People moved to tears. Others demanding an investigation. The next morning, when Eleanor arrived at work, she was barred from entering. "Management's orders," the security guard said, avoiding her eyes. "My belongings are in there. They said to wait for them to contact you." She didn't cry. She just sat down on the curb, took out her phone, and called home. "Hello, Mom? Is that you?" "Eleanor? What happened? If Mateo asks, tell him everything is fine. Tell him Mommy is just sorting some things out." "Elena, what is this about a video? I'll explain later, but if anyone asks about me, you just tell them she did what a real doctor would do." Because that's what she was, even if the world was still deciding whether or not to believe it. Outside the airport, the sun was beginning to rise, but Elena was still sitting on the curb, her uniform wrinkled, her eyes tired but dry. She no longer cried. She had learned long ago that tears don't move systems, they just wet the floor. Around 9 a.m., the phone finally rang. It was Mark, the supervisor. "I need you to come to the company headquarters." "What for?" "The board wants to talk to you." Without a uniform, without an ID badge, without a ride, Eleanor took 2 buses to the third-party contractor's office. When she arrived, she was led by a receptionist who didn't even look her in the eye. In the meeting room, 3 people were waiting. Mark, a company lawyer, and a man who introduced himself as an institutional image consultant. "Elena, thank you for coming," the consultant said, his tone clipped. "We have a delicate situation on our hands." She just nodded. "The video has gone viral, and as you know, that creates some unexpected exposure." "I didn't post anything." "We're not accusing you," the lawyer interjected. But we need to protect the company's reputation. Elena clenched her fists under the table. Protect it from what? From the appearance that we employ someone practicing medicine illegally. I saved a life, and that's commendable, the consultant continued, choosing his words like they were thorns. But the law is clear. Without a license, you cannot present yourself as a doctor. Eleanor took a deep breath. I presented myself as a doctor when a person was dying. Would you have preferred I stay silent? Silence filled the room. Look, Elena, Mark finally said, glancing at a paper in front of him. The company has decided to terminate your contract for improper exposure of the company's image. Her eyes widened. I'm being fired for cause, the lawyer added. It took Elena a few seconds to process it. For cause, as if she had committed a crime. She stood up slowly, trying to keep her dignity intact. You're punishing me for saving a life. We are acting within the law, the consultant replied. And what about ethics? Ethics are not our department. We're just here to protect the company. She walked out of the room with her heart pounding. But it wasn't anger. It was humiliation, the kind that seeps into your bones without making a sound. Hours later, she got home to find Matteo watching the video on a loop on a neighbor's phone. He ran to her. Mom, that's you. Everyone is talking about you. You're a hero. She hugged her son tightly. They fired me, Matteo. He pulled back, confused. But why? Because not everyone wants to be saved. They're wrong, he said, his voice cracking. You're a doctor. The next morning, the story hit the mainstream press. Unlicensed janitor saves healthcare billionaire. Now she's unemployed. Opinions were split like a razor's edge. The system is criminal, not her, some said. Practicing medicine without a license is a serious offense, said others. Elena refused to speak to reporters. She turned off her phone, avoided social media, and focused on the basics, getting food and medicine for Matteo. 2 days later, she had to go to a bus terminal to pick up a box from a food pantry. In line, she recognized 2 of her former co-workers. They saw her, glanced at each other, and turned their faces away. It hurt, more than the legal arguments, more than the company's threats. It hurt to be forgotten so quickly. She had saved a life, but for many, that didn't erase her mistake. It was as if her only crime had been to remind the world of who she really was. On Friday of that same week, a notification appeared on her phone. A summons to appear for a preliminary hearing at the district attorney's office. Reason: investigation into a complaint of the unauthorized practice of medicine. It was official. She was now under investigation. Sitting alone in her kitchen, Eleanor stared at the summons for hours. There was no money for a lawyer, no institutional support, no uniform, no badge, no job. Matteo walked into the kitchen holding a drawing. I drew you in a white coat, Mom. She looked at the drawing, her eyes welling up. You're the strongest doctor in the world. Why do you think so? Because you save me every day, even when the world doesn't want you to. Elena hugged him for a long, long time. It was here, in this cramped queen's kitchen, that the truth lived. And even if the world screamed that she wasn't a doctor, one heart had started beating again because of her, and that no one could ever take away. The silence in Elena's kitchen was heavy, the kind that takes up space, that suffocates. Matteo was asleep in his room, his breathing shallow, his asthma always flared up with the changing weather. She had given him the last of his inhaler, and she had no idea how she would buy the next one. On the table, the summons from the DA's office seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Unauthorized practice of medicine. The phrase hammered in her head like a final judgment. Through the thin wall, she could hear her neighbor's old TV, where a pundit was speaking in an indignant tone. The woman who saved a billionaire now faces prosecution, justice or injustice. You decide. The neighbor knocked on her door, holding a container of rice. I made a little extra. I know things aren't easy right now. Elena thanked her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It wasn't just the hunger. It was the weight of knowing she was being punished for doing the right thing. That if she had just stood by, turned a blind eye, She'd still be cleaning bathrooms without a care in the world. But a man would be dead on a cold floor. The phone rang. An unknown number. Elena Rojas. Yes, this is David Chen, a reporter from the Urban Truths website. I'm working on a story about your case. I don't want to give an interview. You don't have to. I just want to hear your side of the story. My side of the story doesn't matter to anyone. It matters, and it could help you. She hesitated, then hung up. Elena didn't trust in sides anymore. Hers was always dismissed by someone with more power, a louder voice, or more money. On Sunday, she left early to find temporary work as a house cleaner. She walked to the bus stop, the backpack on her shoulders feeling heavier than ever. At a newsstand, a headline stared back at her: "Unlicensed Doctor or Invisible Hero." Below it was a blown-up photo from the viral video. Her on her knees, performing chest compressions on Arthur Sterling. People were starting to recognize her. A woman pointed with her phone. A man whispered to his friend, "That's her." Even the admiring smiles brought no comfort, because she wasn't looking for fame. She was looking for respect. When she got home, she found Mateo drawing on the living room floor. He looked up at her and asked quietly, "Are you going to go to jail, Mom?" "No, mijo. They don't arrest people for saving lives. But they're saying you're a criminal. They don't know me." "I do." And in that moment, Elena realized what was truly at stake. It wasn't just her career. It was the image her son would carry of her for the rest of his life. It was what he would learn about courage, justice, and silence. On Tuesday, she had to appear for the hearing, alone, wearing a pair of slacks borrowed from her neighbor and the only clean blouse she owned. She waited for 3 hours on a hard wooden bench, watching names get called. Some had lawyers, others had briefcases. She had nothing. When her name echoed down the hall, the floor seemed to fall away. In the cold room, the prosecutor stared at a file. Across the table, a representative from the contracting company spoke firmly. The employee, without legal certification, assumed the role of a physician, endangering a citizen's life. Elena felt the words like a slap. When they asked her to speak, her hands were trembling. "I saw a man dying in front of me, and everything I was taught, in medical school, in my residency, on my shifts. It all came rushing back. I didn't think about losing my job. I only thought that he could live." The prosecutor looked at her. "Do you have proof of your training? A medical degree from the University of Havana. Documentation is attached to my pending application for license certification. Why didn't you wait for the certification to act?" "Because heart attacks don't wait for paperwork." Silence. The company representative cleared her throat. "She put the company at risk and saved a life," the prosecutor responded. More silence. Elena left the room without knowing the outcome. The case would remain under review. But just then, outside in the hallway, a woman with graying hair approached her. "You're the woman from the video?" Elena nodded. "My husband died last year in an airport. There was no help. There was no one like you." She grabbed Elena's hands tightly. "Thank you for existing." Those words broke through what little resistance she had left. Elena cried. Without hiding, without shame. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel wrong. She felt human. That night, when she got home, she called the journalist who had reached out to her. "Hello, this is Elena. Are you still willing to hear my side of the story?" On the other end, a surprised silence. And then, a firm voice. "I'm listening." She sat down, took a deep breath, and began to tell him everything, not to defend herself, but to exist. "Have you ever done the right thing, even knowing it could cost you everything? Have you ever put yourself at risk just because you couldn't stand by and watch an injustice happen? If you have, just comment "yes" below, so I know you're out there. Because sometimes we just need to know we're not alone in this world, and I'm here, reading every single one of your comments. When the article was published on a grey Thursday morning, Elena didn't know. She was sweeping the sidewalk in front of an apartment building where she had started working as a cleaner. An elderly woman in the neighborhood needed help twice a week. It wasn't much, but it paid for groceries. On her old phone, notifications were turned off to save the battery. But at 11:37 a.m., Mrs. Gable called from the living room. "Eleanor, is that you on the television?" She ran inside. On the small, staticky TV, a reporter was saying, "The truth behind the woman who saved the healthcare tycoon. She wasn't a fraud. She was a real doctor." David Chen's report included photos of her Cuban diploma, interviews with former classmates, pictures of the university where Elena had studied, the official record of her license application. It was all there. But the most powerful piece of evidence wasn't the documents. It was the recorded phone call with Dr. Ben Carter, the airport physician. He said, "She knew exactly what she was doing. She executed the protocol with precision. If it weren't for her, Arthur Sterling would have died." Within hours, Elena's name exploded on social media again. But this time, the chorus of support was deafening. Doctors began posting videos explaining that the US certification process for foreign physicians was exclusionary, bureaucratic, and cruel. Lawyers offered pro bono help. A grassroots movement on social media gained traction. "She is a doctor." Late that afternoon, Elena received a call that left her speechless. "Elena, this is the office of St. Damian's Hospital. Mr. Arthur Sterling has requested a personal meeting with you." Silence. "Is he okay?" "He's recovered. And he's grateful." Elena hesitated. For a second, she felt the sting of humiliation from that day in the VIP lounge. But then she remembered a lesson life had taught her. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about setting yourself free. Tell him, "I accept." 2 days later, a car took her to the most luxurious private hospital in the city, the same one that had rejected her resume years earlier for lacking US equivalency. She entered a suite that smelled of eucalyptus and quiet wealth. Arthur Sterling was sitting up, his expression less arrogant than she remembered. His hair was perfectly combed, but his eyes, they were different. He looked at her and said, "You saved my life." She answered, her voice steady. "You treated me like I was nothing, and I still did what had to be done. Because I am a doctor." Sterling nodded. "I deserved what people are saying, but I want to try and fix what I did. Not just with you, with a lot of people." Elena crossed her arms. "Money can't buy a conscience." "No, but it can fund justice." There was a pause. He then slid an envelope across the table. "This is an official proposal to support you through the entire certification process with all costs covered by me. And there's more. I want to finance the project you dream of, the community clinic." Elena didn't reach for the envelope right away. "Why would you do this?" "Because when I collapsed, I was saved by someone the system discards, and it showed me that I am part of the problem. If I want to live differently, I have to start now." She took a deep breath. Her wounded pride still ached, but hope was pulsing too. "The project's name is Open Heart, in honor of my father." "It's a good name," Sterling replied. "I'd like to open mine as well." Elena took the envelope. For the first time in a long time, she felt she was reclaiming something bigger than a job, her own identity. Leaving the hospital, she was met by a crowd of photographers. She stopped, looked directly into a camera, and said simply, "I am a doctor, and I never stopped being one." That night, the video of that statement went viral across the country. Thousands of comments, letters, invitations. One of them came from the state medical board. "We would like to hear your story and review your case with urgency." But what moved Elena the most was something else entirely. In his room, Matteo was holding a piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "It's a contract I made," he said. "If you become a doctor again, I promise to study every day to be just like you." She laughed through her tears. "You don't have to be a doctor, mijo. You just have to be good." He replied with the certainty of someone who had already figured out the world. "But being good is exactly what a doctor does, right?" She hugged him. That was the real turning point. Not in the press, not in the courts, but in the eyes of a boy who knew how to recognize a hero, even one without a badge. Elena's transformation didn't start with applause. It started with doubt. The morning after her meeting with Sterling, she stood for 40 minutes at her front door, the envelope in her hand. Inside was an official contract, stamped, signed, with her name in bold letters. The man who had nearly thrown her out of the VIP lounge now wanted to sponsor her new beginning. But trust isn't rebuilt with ink. Elena still felt like she was in an invisible trap. After so many years of being ignored, tested and pushed down, now that doors were opening, she was hesitant to walk through them. What if it's just another disguised humiliation? She muttered to herself. Even so, she acted. She called the number on the letter. She was instructed to go to the International Medical Certification Center, where her entire case would be reopened. On the scheduled day, she arrived with a worn-out folder, her hair pulled back, and her heart racing. At the front desk, the receptionist looked at her, then at the computer. Dr. Elena Rojas. Yes. Your case has been prioritized. Mr. Arthur Sterling has confirmed his sponsorship. And does that change anything? It changes everything. You'll have a direct review with the board, and you'll be assigned a mentor to guide you until the exam. Elena breathed. It was real. It was happening. The following week, she began her medical update courses. The pace was frantic. She had to review forgotten material, relearn technical procedures, and study American medical ethics. In the first class, she sat in the back, afraid of being noticed. But the professor recognized her. We have among us a woman who saved a life, and is here to reclaim what was always hers. She felt her eyes well up, but she took a deep breath. She didn't want to be celebrated. She wanted to be prepared. At home, Mateo started helping her. He'd write questions on slips of paper, pretend to be a patient, and create fictional case files. "Doctor, I have chest pain," he'd say dramatically. She would smile, correct him, and on the inside she was becoming whole again. Still, insecurity haunted her. During one class, a fellow student remarked, "You're the one from the video, right?" "I am." "You're going to take our spot." "What do you mean?" "These paid, sponsored fellowships. Some of us have been fighting for years. I fought too." Elena left the room with a lump in her throat. Even when doing everything right, she would still be judged. But she decided she wouldn't carry someone else's guilt. At the end of that month, the journalist David Chen contacted her again. "I want to do a follow-up story. Show how your process is going. Only if you also show the barriers. I don't want to be portrayed as a miracle. I want to show that the struggle continues. Deal." The article was published under the headline, "Certification isn't a miracle, it's an act of resistance." It was the most read story of the week. Some praised her, others criticized her. They called it opportunism, said Sterling was using the situation to clean up his own image. Elena didn't deny the contradiction, but she also wouldn't let fear define her choices. She began attending meetings with lawyers, other foreign-trained doctors, and representatives from the Department of Health who wanted to hear her story as part of a study to reform the certification system. She was listened to, yes, but she was also tested. If you want to be a doctor in the US, you have to understand that the rules are different here. I understand. I just don't accept that they should be used to exclude those who most want to help. In parallel, she and Sterling began to design the Open Heart Project together. It would be a community clinic, providing free care in underserved areas. Sterling offered a building. She demanded independence. "I don't want your name on the front door." "Fair enough," he replied. "I want to atone, not get credit." It was in this process of building that Eleanor began to change internally. She no longer apologized for who she was. She didn't lower her eyes when someone recognized her on the street. She didn't hesitate to say, "I am a doctor." But she still faced setbacks. At a project launch dinner, one of the investors approached her with cynicism. "So now you're going to pretend you've always been part of the elite?" She smiled. "No, I'm just going to remember that saving lives has no social class." "You got lucky." "It wasn't luck, it was training." He fell silent. Eleanor's response didn't come from anger, but from certainty. Because now she knew what she carried inside her wasn't just knowledge, it was resistance, truth, and a calling. And even with a heart still bruised by old wounds, she was learning to walk with them, without hiding, without denial. Slowly, the doctor who had always existed on the inside was being reborn on the outside. The day of the licensing exam was cold and damp, the kind of weather that seeped into your bones and reminded Elena of the days she spent scrubbing floors on her knees, her hands stiff from cleaning chemicals. But on this day, she wasn't carrying a mop. She was carrying a pen, a clipboard, and the weight of years spent waiting for justice. Matteo hugged her at the door. "Today you become a doctor again, right, Mom?" She smiled. "I never stopped being one. But today, the paper will make it official." The exam site was an austere building, without smiles or promises. Elena walked in, feeling the eyes of other candidates on her. Some recognized her, others didn't, but they all seemed to carry the same tension. She sat down, took a deep breath, and as she received the first exam booklet, she felt the most terrifying thing of all: peace. For the first time, she wasn't there to prove something to others. She was there for herself. Every question she answered was a memory of something she already knew. Every technical term took her back to the night spent studying by the light of the hallway lamp, so as not to wake her son. Every clinical case was a memory of Cuba, of her hospital shifts, of the hands that saved lives long before anyone said she could. Hours later, the board administered the practical portion. This was the stage where many stumbled: simulated patient encounters, high-pressure decision-making, rapid-fire questions. But Eleanor seemed to dance in the center of the room. She moved with precision, calm, and confidence. Even the examiners, trained to remain neutral, exchanged surprised glances. At the end of the evaluation, one of the physicians on the board approached her. "Dr. Rojas, your performance was flawless." She didn't respond. She just nodded, holding back tears. 3 days later, the official confirmation arrived, passed with distinction. Her provisional medical license number was already being generated. That afternoon, she walked to the mirror in her living room and looked at herself in a way she hadn't in years. Hair pulled back, a freshly washed white coat, her name embroidered on the chest: Dr. Elena Rojas, Cardiology. She had stitched the letters herself, with the hands that once swept floors, now ready to touch lives with the authority that should never have been taken from her. The same day, she was invited to a public ceremony organized by movements supporting fair licensing for foreign doctors. She accepted, but with one condition: "I don't want tributes, I want promises of change." At the event, she walked onto the stage with steady steps. In the audience were journalists, officials, doctors, students, and the curious. She took the microphone, breathed in, and said, "For years I believed that silence was protection, that not causing trouble was the safest path. But when silence becomes the rule, it becomes a prison. I saved one life, and I almost lost my own. Not because I made a mistake, but because I dared to remind the system of who I am. Today I am officially a doctor in the United States, but I always was. And if you want to congratulate me, then fight so that no one else has to wait 7 years to be heard." She received a standing ovation. The next day, Elena returned to the headquarters of the project she was creating with Sterling. Open heart. She found the space clean with fresh paint, new furniture arriving, and a small group of volunteers already registering patients from the community. She walked in, her white coat draped over her arm, looked around, and took a deep breath. "Ready to begin?" Sterling asked. She looked at him. The arrogance was gone from his eyes. There was only a man who had learned the hard way that life is too fragile to be controlled by money. "I've always been ready. I just needed the world to let me." On the first morning of appointments, the lines stretched around the block. Simple people, forgotten people, people like her. Her first patient was an elderly woman with a history of hypertension, neglected by the system for months. Elena took her blood pressure, listened to her heart, looked her in the eyes, and smiled. Everything is going to be okay. In the next room, Matteo was helping organize files. He wore a t-shirt that read, "My mom saves lives." At the end of the day, after the last patient had left, Elena walked alone to the clinic door and looked up at the orange sky. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She wasn't thinking about vindication. She was thinking of her father, of the streets of Havana, of the voice that said, "If you save a life, your existence has meaning." That night, she slept soundly for the first time in years. Not from exhaustion, but from peace. Because finally, she was doing what she was put on this earth to do, with a white coat, with a license, with pride, and above all, with truth. Elena's comeback story made headlines everywhere, from janitor to doctor. The country that almost wasted a lifesaver. Open Heart Project gets a 1,000-patient waiting list in 3 days. The interview requests poured in, along with invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and galas. But she turned down almost all of them. She preferred to spend her days with clipboards, test results, and the stories no one else wanted to hear. There was only one thing she agreed to do: visit in person the places where she had been humiliated, not to confront, but to be seen. She started at the airport. Wearing her white coat, she walked in through a service entrance, just as she always had, but this time she didn't hide her face. No security guard tried to stop her. On the contrary, the same guard who had once told her to wait outside the premises lowered his eyes when he saw her. "Good morning, Dr. Rojas," he said, embarrassed. "Good morning," she replied with firm kindness. She walked to the VIP lounge, the very place where, months earlier, she had knelt to save the life of a man who would have never even acknowledged her presence. The once haughty receptionist now wore a nervous smile. "Can I help you with something?" "No, thank you. I just came to see the place where everything changed." She stood there in silence for a few minutes, observing the same floor she had once scrubbed, the same sofa she had cleaned with torn gloves. But now her eyes were level with everyone else's, and that was enough. The same day she visited her former contracting company, she arrived unannounced. She was met with shock. Mark, her ex-supervisor, hurried out from the back of the office. "Dr. Rojas, I wasn't expecting—" She held up a hand. "I didn't come for an apology, or to ask for anything. I just came to tell you that the woman you fired for cause is now a leading figure in community health, and that many of your employees here still send me messages. Most of them are afraid they'll be the next one to be thrown away. Elena, it's Dr. Rojas." He lowered his head. She didn't stay for more than 5 minutes. She left as she had entered, with her head held high. A few days later, she participated in a public hearing in Washington, D.C., The room was packed. Among the politicians, bureaucrats, and experts was the same medical board official who had once said Elena could be dangerous. She was called to the front. "Dr. Rojas, how do you see the current certification process?" She took a deep breath. She didn't want to be aggressive. She wanted to be clear. "I see a system that punishes competence when it's born outside of America's borders, that prioritizes those who can pay, not those who can heal. That ignores the fact that every sideline doctor is a life that might not be saved." Silence. "Today, I have a medical license. But long before that, I had a prepared heart. I just had to fight an entire country for someone to believe in me." Timid applause rose, then grew into a wave. The board official who had criticized her now approached. "Doctor, I was hard on you in the past. I know. I was wrong. I was wrong too, for believing a diploma was enough to change everything." Slowly, Elena's name became a symbol, not just of a woman who won, but of a woman who persisted. On social media, patients posted smiling photos with her. "She listened to me when no one else would. She explained things the system never had time to. She saved me, not with medicine, but with her presence." Even Arthur Sterling appeared publicly for an interview. "She saved me twice, First my heart, then my conscience. At a press conference, visibly emotional, he announced, "I am selling off part of my hospital empire to fund public health and prevention projects." And yes, it's inspired by her. In the audience, Elena watched, standing. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just listened, because now the world was speaking with more truth. One day she was invited to give a talk at a medical school. The auditorium was filled with first-year students, their eyes bright and attentive. "If I could give you one piece of advice," she said, "it would be this: never believe that your ID badge defines you as a doctor. What defines you is what you do when no one is watching, or when everyone is, and you act anyway." Standing ovation. At the end of the event, a young woman sought her out. "Doctor, my father used to say that a poor woman can't be a doctor, but ever since he saw you on TV, he apologized to me. And what do you want to be?" "A doctor. Just like you, not just like me. Better." Back in New York, the Open Heart Clinic became a benchmark. Hospitals began offering partnerships. Universities requested affiliations. But Elena was selective. Here, no one profits from the pain of others. One of those days, while seeing a patient, she heard a commotion in the hallway. It was Matteo, now 12, out of breath. "Mom, come see this!" Outside, a news van was filming the front of the clinic. The anchor was saying, "Here, there are no bills. There is only listening. Here, there are no egos hanging on a lanyard. There is only a white coat and empathy. Here, a country was saved from the inside out." Elena went back inside, washed her hands, and saw her next patient as if nothing had happened, because the world could react however it wanted. But she would remain, with her heart whole. For a long time, Elena believed she had to prove herself, that she would only be a doctor if someone else said, "Now you can be." But over time, and through pain, she understood. Identity isn't born from a piece of paper. It's born from selfless action. She learned that the world can try to strip everything from you, your job, your title, your space, but it only truly erases you when it convinces you to doubt who you are. And she almost doubted. Almost believed that because she was cleaning toilets, she was less worthy, that because she came from another country, her knowledge was inferior. She almost accepted the silence, but something always stopped her from giving up: the sound of her own heart, and the sound of other hearts that could still be saved. The hardest lesson came with time. Doing good doesn't always bring applause. Sometimes doing good brings rejection. It brings closed doors, termination, judgment. But even so, she carried on, and she discovered there is an invisible strength that arises when we act according to our beliefs, even when everything around us says we're wrong. That strength doesn't come from pride, it comes from integrity. Elena didn't want to be celebrated. She wanted to be respected. She wanted people to understand that dignity isn't a prize. It's a right, and dignity is this: being able to say who you are, to act with truth, to live without hiding. Today, she knows her mission isn't just to treat patients. It's also to remind other invisible people, others who sweep floors with hearts full of dreams, that no one is born small. We are made small, and to resist is a way of living fully. Because Elena's true diploma didn't come from a licensing board. It came from the hands that save, from the words that comfort, and from the son who, looking at her, never once doubted that his mother was a hero. She just needed to remember it too. And now, every day as she puts on the white coat with her name embroidered on it, she doesn't think about what she's gained. She thinks about what she refused to let them take from her: her name, her voice, and the right to be exactly who she was born to be. Months passed since the opening of Open Heart. The project, which started with just 2 rooms and a borrowed defibrillator, had become a center of excellence in community care. The clinic saw an average of 120 people a week, without charging a single penny. But more than the numbers, it was the feeling of the place that was remarkable. People who came from far away, people who had never been truly heard by a doctor, people who were moved to tears just by being called by their name. And at the center of it all was her, Dr. Elena Rojas. Now officially recognized, but more humble than ever. She didn't move to a fancier neighborhood. She continued to take the same bus with Mateo, walk with her backpack on, and greet all her neighbors with the same smile she had when she cleaned stairwells. Her name became a reference point at universities and medical boards, but she made a point to repeat, "What made me a doctor wasn't the license. It was not giving up on myself." Mateo grew up watching it all. He would sketch out future plans at a desk in the clinic, organize patient files, and pretend to be the receptionist. "One day, I'll be your co-worker," he'd say. "I hope so," she'd reply. "But even if you're not, I'm already proud of the man you're becoming." Arthur Sterling, for his part, stepped away from the spotlight. He sold off a portion of his hospital network and created a foundation to fund the certification process for foreign-trained medical professionals. He called the project Bridges, inspired, as he said, by the person who stopped him from falling into the abyss. He never apologized publicly, but he helped discreetly. It was his way of rebuilding himself without promoting himself. Mark, the former supervisor, was let go from the company after an internal investigation. He now works in a support role at a small regional airport. They say he never spoke of the incident again. The contracting company faced a class action lawsuit. It lost major contracts. It was forced to overhaul its practices. And Sophia Chen, the journalist whose video started it all, won an international award for citizen journalism. But she always said she was the real journalist. Because with a single gesture, she made the entire world listen to what it preferred to ignore. Elena never saw herself as a symbol or a martyr. She just wanted to be heard, and above all, to be useful. Today, she sleeps in peace, not because everything was perfectly resolved, but because after so long, she can finally be who she always was, without ever having to hide again. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like. It shows us it's worth continuing to tell real stories like this one. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I read them all with care and make a point to reply to everyone who takes a moment to comment. If you believe in the power of courage and truth, subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories to tell, and your subscription gives me the strength to continue. And now, don't go anywhere. Choose one of the two stories on your screen and join me for the next video.